District of Conservation is sponsored by CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Hi everyone, there is some breaking news out of Virginia I needed to share with you all today because it concerns the appointment of former Trump EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler to take over and serve as the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources, and has another long name, but we call it the Department of Natural Resources. And we want to go over details, what that looks like, how preservationist environmentalists and radical environmentalists, especially those on the left, are reacting to the news of this. So we're going to break this all down for you here on a late edition of District of Conservation on this Wednesday. So here's what you need to know about Andrew Wheeler. I'm going to read for you Glenn Youngkin's announcement press release informing the public about his selection of Andrew Wheeler. I'm going to explain a little bit what the secretary does. They oversee 5 agencies. I'm also going to point out what critics are saying because we got to be fair. I'll even point out their crazy suggestions about who he is. And then I will lead you guys to check out my past interview with former EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler. We also spoke to him here on the podcast, but I've spoken to him before, and I want to reassure you that he's not a despoiler of nature, despite what opponents of his are leading the public to believe. Please, please, please make sure you listen to what people have to say and not just take what certain partisan blogs like Blue Virginia are claiming. So listen to what people have to say. Take it into account for yourself, and I want to just bring you guys the facts. But all right, here is more about the news of Andrew Wheeler's selection to lead the Department of Natural Resources here in Virginia. Earlier today, POLITICO broke the news that Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin was slated to select former EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler, who was the second of 2 EPA administrators the Trump administration had. The first was Scott Pruitt, who left midway through his tenure following ethics charges against him. And Andrew Wheeler was deputy administrator, actually. So it wasn't just like he was some new guy who was brought in. We have talked about what the EPA did under Trump's administration. Like I said, I will link for you the episode where we spoke to Administrator Wheeler if you want to learn more about his thoughts on different issues. But now, with Youngkin issuing out this press release, I believe it was around 3 o'clock local time, Eastern time here in Virginia, that confirmed Politico's report that he would select Andrew Wheeler to lead this department. And here's what the press release says, because I get the press releases. And it says that Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin today announced he has chosen Andrew Wheeler as the next Secretary of Natural Resources and Michael Rolband as the next Director of Environmental Quality. Youngkin's statement says, Virginia needs a diverse energy portfolio in place to fuel our economic growth, continued preservation of our natural resources, and a comprehensive plan to tackle rising sea levels. Andrew and Michael share my vision in finding new ways to innovate and use our natural resources to provide Virginia with a stable, dependable, and growing power supply that will meet Virginia's power demands without passing the cost onto the consumer, said Governor-elect Youngkin. Together, we will address Virginia's ongoing environmental, energy, and natural resources challenges, including protecting the Chesapeake Bay, fully funding our best management practices, solving longstanding stormwater management issues, and establishing a coastal Virginia resiliency authority. Finally, David Paylor should be commended for his decades of service to DEQ. He has been an invaluable public servant, and I wish him well in his next adventures. I'm sure he will continue to make significant contributions to the Commonwealth. The Secretary of Natural Resources will be responsible for overseeing 5 agencies. What are those 5 agencies? Well, one of them includes the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, which is our game agency. It'll also include overseeing the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality and also the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. And there are 2 others that you guys can find out. And I will link to the Natural Resources website for you to learn more about the different sub-agencies. But he will be overseeing those 5 agencies and working with different administrators in each of those sub-agencies to enact Glenn Youngkin's agenda. And a lot of people especially Blue Virginia, are very concerned that Wheeler is the worst cabinet pick for his incoming administration yet. Blue Virginia called him Trump's appallingly bad anti-environment EPA administrator. They said that he is far, far worse than any other nominee that Youngkin has announced. This pick, according to Blue Virginia, is beyond appalling for a host of reasons. For more background on Trump's EPA head, see here, And then they think that his claim that climate crisis isn't an existential threat is horrible. And I don't know how people feel about the supposed climate threat, but if it really was a threat, they wouldn't be calling for a complete restructuring of the government in terms of our economy to do it. And if the climate crisis was super pressing, why didn't they tackle the snow accumulation we had? If they can't handle a snowstorm, the Department of Transportation, how can they handle tackling a supposed climate crisis? That's something to consider too. And apparently they think that Wheeler's testimony before the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors against instituting a 5 cents per single-use plastic bag tax is appalling too. And he said that he didn't pick this anti-environment extremist randomly. Already, Youngkin has declared war on clean energy and climate action, pledging to pull Virginia out of RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a program that represents our best chance to advance the Commonwealth to a clean energy future. So they don't like his positions. They're calling him the usual attacks. They're using the usual attacks to deride his selection, calling him an extremist, saying that he was terrible. And if you want to learn what Administrator Wheeler actually stood for, I encourage you to listen to my past interview with him. Certainly, I was a lot friendlier than most reporters he's encountered, but I also asked him a lot of questions about different facets of the agency, how they balanced environmental stewardship with free enterprise or business, because we have seen a tussling of back and forth between true conservation and preservationist environmentalism, which wants to remove business and private individuals from environmental action. And a lot of people want to move back to, like what we're seeing in the Biden administration, to a top-down approach where very few people from outside of government can have influence on policy. They want to restrict the type of stakeholders that make decisions. They want to appeal and appease kind of preservationist extremists. And I asked him all those questions. I did this interview about a year ago. So check it out, either the podcast format or the YouTube version, to learn where he actually stands. And we're going to do our best to get former Administrator Wheeler to come on the podcast. I'm going to find some way to reach out to him once he gets settled into the office, to speak with him and to have my listeners, you all, hear him through an unfiltered lens, to actually hear him speak about what his goals are, what he hopes to implement. If he truly is an extremist, as his opponents like Blue Virginia are painting him to be, I think it's only fair to give these people a platform to actually speak clearly and to speak without fear of retribution on formats like this. So it'll be my goal to speak to him, to touch upon what his goals are to make Virginia actually adhere to true conservation, where you can balance environmental stewardship with a burgeoning economy. I will not indulge Blue Virginia. A source like Blue Virginia and other groups will never approve of who Youngkin was going to select anyway, so it's not surprising to see them resort to fear-mongering, scaremongering, and intentionally misleading where Administrator Wheeler falls on different issues. So he has been the subject of this before when he was dealing with these issues at the federal level. That's what he expressed to me during our interview last December. And if, like I said, if you haven't already, go check out my interview with former EPA Administrator Wheeler, who will soon be Secretary of Natural Resources here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think you'll be surprised by his stances, his kind of sober take on different issues, and just kind of the policy-oriented focus he has. That's what I found to be interesting of him, and I think you'll find that to be interesting too. I'm not too worried about his selection. I liked a lot of their deregulatory agenda. I thought they brought balance back to the EPA after building years of distrust under the Obama administration, 8 years of distrust, conflict out west, no adherence to private property rights or limited adherence to private property rights. So I like what I saw at the federal level. I'm encouraged by what we could see at the state level without having to burden Virginia ratepayers and our energy bills any further. It's already getting expensive to have and maintain energy here. And the push for clean energy, I think, is going to be questioned a bit more because of just the shortcomings of solar and wind, and rightly so. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Andrew Wheeler's selection to be Natural Resources Secretary. If you agree, disagree, have more questions, make sure to let me know. I would love to hear your feedback. And like I said, we will do our best to get him back on District of Conservation once he gets settled into his new role. Thank you for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you're following us on your preferred podcast player. We like to recommend Apple Podcasts because Apple is where most of our listenership hails from. So if you head over to Apple, subscribe, comb through some episodes, and leave us reviews, we'd be more than appreciative of your support in that manner. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. And you can connect with me personally on my social media feeds. All of the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram links that I have are all denoted by blue check marks. Really easy to find me, so engage with me there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to recommend yourself for the show as a prospective guest, I'm all ears to hear and sift through different inquiries. I get a lot of requests, and my schedule is also quite busy, so you'll see guests come from me, but like I said, I'm always open to different guests coming on the show. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.